Happy holidays, everyone, again. And thank you for joining us. Delighted to be joined by Elly and Chad and Dustin. Hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone.
What's up, Simon?
Hi, everyone.
Also, everyone.
So thank you for joining us on this festive last episode of the year. And hi to Bernd and Jay and Marcelo and Lona and Imad and Kent. Thanks, it's all looking and sounding great. Thanks, Kent. Thanks for checking that out. And to Charles. Hi there. And to Hannah. So thank you for joining us for this. And have no fear, this isn't the last one we'll be doing. It's just the last one of this year, and we got loads more planned for next year. And in case you're new to this, you can book those if you go to the maxon.net page. Here we go to events, and here's just some of the things that are happening in the start of next year, including in January, where we're looking at Cinema 4D Light all January. I'm going to be investigating that, looking at various workflows for that, which is going to be fun. And in case you're wondering, yes, this session is going to be recorded, and here's where all the recordings go, the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel. And it's an interesting thing here. If you miss any of the links that we talk about today, you can check those out on the recording, because under each of these sessions, we try and put links in. So for example, if we look at last week's session, then we can see here all the amazing things that Dustin was putting together for this particular comp. If we open up the description, then we have, here we go, download project files for this session. And in here, this is how they look inside Dropbox, and you can download those files. So we got Elly's great Gingerdead scene from the first session, and also Dustin's files, including EXR if you wanted to work out that workflow and play with that. And also, we've got a whole bunch of timestamps on them. Dr. Sassy on our team every week diligently goes through and puts these timestamps, and he's done this for many, many months. So just thank you, Sassy, for doing that. We really appreciate that. And that just makes it really easy for everyone to just jump into the topic that they were going to look at. So please have a look at that too. And also this week, we're going to be sharing some of the things that we didn't share last week. We kind of run out of time. So in that mode, here is the gingerbread texture that Elly put together. And so there was a request last week that what if we wanted to make the gingerbread man look more realistic? So here's an extra texture that you could use for that. And that's also in that area, that download area in Dropbox. And if you're wondering how to get to that, there is a PDF inside the webinar software. If you go to handouts, then that PDF links you to that area here. So download project files from that location, and that's just freely available. You can be able to just download that. And Charles is saying, thank you for the, I'm paraphrasing Charles, but thank you for the texture. And now it's going to make it in Redshift. So that's brilliant, thank you. And also, there's much love for your lighting setup, Dustin, actually, which we all have every week. We have lighting envy for how you're looking in your studio.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was it's kind of a fun setup.
Absolutely.
Not sure exactly what to say. Thanks.
Although you need a roof in there because some of the snow is getting in. I can see.
Yeah, I probably should have made a blizzard. You know, in Michigan here it gets pretty gnarly, so I should have made a blizzard.
Absolutely, yes. It's probably just forcing its way through the roof, isn't it?
Sometimes.
And you will have noticed also on this PDF that we do have a link for a free t-shirt. We just want to say thank you for joining us on these sessions. So if you follow that link, then you go to this special secret location, the Ask the Trainer section of the Maxon merch store. And if you go to that link, then the password to get into that area is thank you. And then you can choose a t-shirt of your choice, really, and in a variety of different colors, and it will automatically take that $25 or around about that fee wherever you live off the t-shirt price. You just have to pay for shipping, but that's only about $3 or $4 or euros or pounds, depending where you live. But we just wanted to say thanks. Thanks for supporting us. Thanks for all your questions, and thanks for joining us on this journey this year and in advance for next year too. So, right, let's jump over to the main event. And that's carrying on what we were talking about, using the assets from the asset browser well, it's a very loose connection, isn't it? Using a couple of assets and then going crazy with our own stuff, really. That's going to be the title that we should put in. But what we're going to do is we're going to pick up from last week, where Dustin was showing us all these amazing things you could do with different depth passes from Cinema, and made a casual reference to how he usually likes to light scenes with normals. And so that was so popular that we decided to dedicate a whole short segment to it today. So shall I hand over to you, Dustin, and you can share more of your insider secrets. Here you go, I'll make you presenter.
Awesome. All right, so I will do my best to make this short because I know that Chad has some awesome stuff to get to. Am I sharing my screen now? Everybody can see it.
You are. I completely forgot to say what we're doing this week. Sorry. Chad is also going to take the scene on and make it look amazing with motion graphics elements and do some fun stuff in things like Trapcode. Sorry, Chad.
You know, if there's time or whatever. Like, let's legalistic go see about it. Play it by ear.
All right. Okay.
All right. So we have a shader ball render here in Photoshop. Basically, what we're doing is carrying on a little bit from the discussion that we had last week about how I like to use channels to relight with normals. Now, there are a lot of ways that we could go and really rabbit hole this entire session, and I'll try not to do that. But right now we're going to focus on channels, because what I like to do is get my alphas and my mats all set up and then start to rebuild some of the lighting or even adjust and tweak the lighting using the normals pass. So in Photoshop here, I just have a beauty render of the shader ball, and then we have a normals pass here. And what we're going to be doing is actually taking a look at the different channels. So the red, green, and blue channels. And say that I wanted to have a bit more light coming from the red direction here, but I really wanted to shift the angle of that light. Well, what we can do is actually head into the smart object here. So I have my normals pass as a smart object. It's really the way that I like to work most often, especially when it's on client type commissions, because this is really going to be something that allows us to go back and tweak the settings and kind of have infinite control over our scene here. So with the shader ball, let's go ahead and Control or Command U, and we're going to enter the hue saturation. I'm not going to change any of this yet, so we'll just go ahead and click OK. And now with light coming from the left side, we know that we'll want to take a look at the red channel here on this normals pass. Now, what we can do with the red channel selected is go ahead and open our hue saturation adjustment that's right underneath the smart filter for that adjustment layer. And now this allows us to hue shift it. And so we can take our hue slider and really start to adjust the way that this mask is going to work. And so in this case here, we can go ahead and move this a little bit, maybe right about there. So this will be coming from the left side. It's moved now a little bit back towards kind of a rim light, sort of offset key light here on the shader ball. And we can also increase the intensity with the saturation here. And so if we go ahead and we start to adjust that, we'll see that we're really starting to push and crunch some of the values of that pass. Let's go ahead and reset that. And then the lightness is just going to be an overall kind of offset. All right, so we like the way that this pass is looking now with the light coming from the left. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Now I can Control or Command click my red channel here, and then we can create a new alpha from selection. So now if we go ahead and take a look, I can deselect here a moment. We have our red, green, and blue channels all set. And then we also have our new alpha that is going to remain static, even if we start to make further adjustments with the normal pass. So I'll go ahead and I'll turn off the smart filters here for the normals. And I will Control or Command click the alpha channel that we just created. We can hide the normals pass for a moment. And then I can head down and create something like a curves adjustment layer. So now when we select the RGB, we won't see anything happen until we head into the properties here. And now we just start to adjust the values in this area. And so now this is going to give us a really easy way of starting to manipulate the light. So one of the things I did most often when I was working in automotive compositing in Nuke is we would have kind of two sets of mats. We would have our Y normals and negative Y normals, so we could adjust kind of the light roll from the top to the bottom of vehicles. So we can go ahead and take a look at that here quickly. If we go ahead and select our normal pass, we can turn that on. And what we'll do is head to the green channel. So we're going to controller command select the green channel, and we can store the alpha as selection here. Go ahead and controller command D to deselect. And now what we'll do is we'll just go ahead and drag this new alpha down to create a new layer, and then controller command I to invert that. So now if we think of this as a layer mask, we have light that's going to be impacting the top of the shader ball. And then down below, we have what's happening underneath. So we can easily create some really nice light fall off and roll from the top to the bottom. All right, so let's go ahead and rename these. We can just double click the name here, and we can name this Y, and we'll just call it Y plus. If I can get it here a minute, there we go. And then we can do Y minus. All right, so let's go ahead and controller command click the Y plus, and we'll add some light to the top. We can actually add something like maybe exposure this time. And we can hide our shader ball for the normals there. And now we can adjust the values here for the top of the shader ball and add a bit more light. And we can also go ahead and controller command click the Y minus to add some nice shading underneath to the bottom part of the shader ball. So we'll add another curves adjustment. And then we can go ahead and drop these values here. So we also talked a lot. Yeah, this is something that I really enjoy doing.
Well, we should have oohs and ahs as you're casually doing this, because and I just add this amazing lighting to this just by adding the slider. We should stop back and breathe at this moment.
Yeah, and it's really infinite. So post-production is probably my biggest playground. So I love kind of look development and whatnot, but especially post-production in Photoshop is a lot of fun. And so I use this a lot on products of any kind, really any of the scenes that I'm working on. And I try not to get into a rabbit hole as I'm doing it. So last week, we also talked about the crypto mats. So if you're rendering with Redshift, the crypto mat is going to kick out its own EXR. And if you're using EXR.io, you have the ability to open these crypto mats in Photoshop this way, to where it starts to split out all of these different layers based on, and this one's actually based on material for the shader ball. So what we can do here is actually go ahead now, and I'm just going to select maybe the background. Let's see. Yeah, so let's go ahead and do them all. Why not? We have fun times. I'll try not to take too much time here, Chad. And what we'll do is we can paste them.
Totally fine.
In this new scene. Controller command G to create a group, and we can call these masks. And now this is going to really allow us to go back in now and start to add the same type of alphas like we did before right inside of our channel library here. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and select the background, controller command click one of our channels here because they're all pure in saturation, and we can store alpha from selection. Go ahead and create a selection based off of this. Controller command click our thumbnail. We can head into our layers panel, close that off. We'll take our lighting adjustments here, controller command G for a group. We can name that light, and then from here we can go ahead and create a layer mask. And then we'll invert it. And so now what we have is the lighting that is just affecting our shader ball or our product here. And so the cool part about this is working this way with layer masks, we really have a whole lot of control over exactly how we want this to look. And so if I head back into, we'll say, the red that we had previously, so we can go ahead and turn that back on. And maybe I'll turn off the top light here a little bit. This is also a way that I do work with kind of adding a gelled look to the lighting that I have in my scene, or if I'm working with different dual tone for grading and whatnot. It's a very easy way to start working with the different normals and the different normal directions. So in this case, we can go ahead and use our Alt, and I believe it's, let's see here, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to navigate our different channels here in curves. And at this point, we can just go ahead and really start to adjust the way that this lighting is impacting our shader ball. And so you can already see that this is a very easy way to manipulate the light, to relight a scene if we happen to need more. And that is why the normals pass is one of my favorites.
Just
All
incredible.
right, do we have any questions? Let's take a look here.
Just a collective intake of breath at this point, I think.
Yeah, that's really epic. Probably should have had you go last.
Sorry.
Giles is saying it's too far down the knowledge tree to have a cogent question. Very good, Giles. This is, and thanks, Ahmed, for that nice comment as well. This is interesting. This is a testament to doing a little prep work, and then that all pays off later on. I mean, that's the key. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say, but whilst you're rushing through these deadlines, it really does pay off to go through those diligent steps and make those renders in those formats as we've been investigating, so that it gives you so much flexibility to do all these post-production passes. Not only in Photoshop, but also in After Effects.
Oh, transition points.
Right over.
Was that a good segue?
That was a great segue.
I love that.
Just before we hand over to Chad, who's going to be working in After Effects to adjust this image, Elly, you made that extra texture for the gingerbread man from last week. Is there any comments you want to add to that, or kind of advice about how to use it?
So it is also a redshift texture, so it isn't a Cinema 4D one. I forgot to mention that. And it's made procedurally. I did it with Maxon noises, which means it can be used for any kind of models. Instead of looking for texture maps or anything, I thought I'd make it in a way that was built from scratch. So yeah, in the shader graph, it looks a little bit kind of, there's a lot going on, but it's got quite a lot of control still. You can change all the colors, change all the noises, enlarge it, scale it down, and it should work absolutely fine.
Fantastic. Well, this might be a good spoiler alert. This might be a good time to mention that Elly is just fantastic at explaining redshift to people, and in tandem with the very popular hands-on with Maxon course that you ran a couple of times last year, taking people from absolute starting point in cinema over 6 weeks or so to actually get people up to speed. She's doing the same with redshift. So expect to see in the new year a hands-on with Maxon redshift class that will take you through all these setups and take you through all those scary nodes and all those, like you just mentioned, those techniques that help you work more quickly and doing things procedurally rather than having to find some texture from somewhere. So that'll be really cool.
Yeah, I can't wait. I just can't wait. We've been planning so much stuff for it, which I won't quite say yet, but yeah, early in the new year.
Excellent. We're looking forward to that. That's amazing. So are many people on the chat as well.
Also me.
Cool. I'm going to send the screen to you, Chad. Here we go.
Okay.
And make you the presenter.
Hopefully you don't live to regret that decision.
Never. Here we go.
Are you seeing my stuff now?
Yeah.
Good. Okay. So welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be doing this thing. I changed my white balance on my camera. Usually I like to have it warm because I have no pigmentation in my skin and it looks terrible. But like it's super Christmassy, so I thought I would make my white balance artificially blue, which is like very cold. You know, it's very chilly in here. It's like 3,500 degrees Kelvin. So what I decided to do, I was like, what can I add to all this magic that's been going on this whole month, you know? And I thought, well, I'm gonna try to make a teaser trailer, take like little bits and pieces of this. And, you know, I've always loved like cover songs where you take a song and then like you just kind of like rearrange it in some kind of like magical, wacky way. And so I tried to do the cover song of what Elly and Dustin have been doing. And so I thought like I could repurpose some of this and then make like a teaser trailer. And this is, it didn't quite, I didn't quite finish it, but because I was having too much fun, too much playing. So I did make this text kind of treatment where this text would pop up. And it's unfortunate, there's not really a way to get the audio. I did some sound design in After Effects, which is like not a great thing. So I was thinking if there's a way to get my audio over to you so you could hear it, I would talk about some of the stuff that I did, because there are some audio effects in After Effects, and I forget about that all the time. So I was adding like reverb and high pass and like all these things that After Effects really has no business having, but it was really fun kind of like playing around with this like sound design stuff in After Effects. Oh, that's what I was gonna do. I was gonna see if I couldn't take my earphones and put it up to the mic, maybe turn it up really loud and you could hear what I did. But it's kind of cool. It's like this typical like action movie thing. It's like bong, you know, and then there's like these like jingle bells, like shing, 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 shing in the background, like all evil sounding with like, a bunch of reverb on it and stuff.
I'm liking
So
your version of doing it. I think you should play it and then do your sound effects over the top, because I'm enjoying that.
That would be great.
You know, I feel like every time we have one of these webinars, I go and I do an audio thing without thinking about it with my mouth, and then everyone's like, "Ha, look at the idiot, do that thing again."
We love it. We love it.
Okay, so it's
I
like
want Chad to do the audio description on all the movies now. That should be an option.
the subtitles.
Yes.
But so it goes, schwong, shing, 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 shing. Oh, and then also there's when this ice kind of goes over the text, there's like these like crackling of ice, you know, like it's growing over that. So I took some paper crackle sound effects, and then I was using the high pass on them to kind of bring that out and make them more icy. So anyways, I guess no point in doing all that audio stuff, but this was so much fun to play with. I meant to just make like a really quick title, just like text over a blank background. And I just kept adding more and more things. It was like super fun. And then I was just playing. This is all ridiculous. So this could be like a choose your own adventure. If there's like something I'm showing, I'm just gonna lightly gloss over a few things. And if there's something we want to go back to or whatever, just again, choose your own adventure in the comments and we could go back to it. I also haven't played with the new VFX Suite tool Bang, which creates like this like muzzle fire. And I thought that was really fun. So then I made like this little like quick little insert shot or whatever, and I used the depth pass. Let's see if I could solo that.
Hey Chad, could you magnify the size of your comp to like fit it into Windows?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I always forget to do that. So then there's that. Because I thought, you know, what's one thing we could all agree on at Christmas time besides gun violence? You know what I mean? So let's just add that to the equation.
And against the Gingerdead.
Against the Gingerdead. Yeah. That makes it better. But I used Bang to create this, and then I used Supercomp to kind of create a glow. I used Magic Bullet Looks to create this like look really quick. I used the Universe Camera Shake effect to put it all together. So I don't know, it was a fun little like quick shot of just a few seconds, and I don't know, I think it worked out pretty well for like how long it took me. This is just a really quick setup, even like including all the design work, you know, like usually for me, like that's what takes up all the time is like trying to go back and forth with like options. And even with all that, it's like really fun to just like slap stuff together and bring this up. I feel like everybody, probably everyone in the audience and everyone else on the panel, like slaps things together in like 2 seconds. I feel like everybody does this, and I never do. Like when I make something, it takes me like 10 times longer than it should. I feel like. But with this, it was like, oh, I was like a normal person for a second. Like I threw something together and it actually looked fun and it was fine. And then this was like the final shot. What?
It depends though, Chad, doesn't it? Because when you were talking at the beginning, you said I just ran out of time to finish it. I mean, that is the definition of deadlines, isn't it? It's like whatever is in our head, do we actually ever get there, or
That's
do we
true.
just have our creations taken away from us?
Yeah, that's true. Thanks for trying to make me feel better, Simon. You always do a really good job of that. I mean, I've been doing like After Effects stuff for like what 20 years. And so like, but when I somehow like set to create something, it's like I've never used it before. It's like, what do I do? So anyways, to make that one.
I feel like that's a very no. I mean, we could have a whole conversation about that stuff. I feel like that's a very normal feeling.
Okay. Thanks guys for trying to make me feel better. I know that you secretly go really fast and get things done really quickly, but thank you for making me feel better. And then I had this like finale shot, which was like pretty fun. And this is the one I didn't finish. But it was kind of like the standoff between like Dustin and the Gingerdead man. And I think I color graded this a little bit too aggressively, kind of intentionally, because it was like fun. It made it seem like more serious and intense. But I was playing around with like the puppet tool, and I didn't really put any effort into it. That's why it's like unfinished. But I was just like, oh, let's see what happens. Oh, wait, let me make that bigger so you can see. But yeah, I wanted to create this thing.
I saw it earlier. I can't stop laughing.
I love having their eyes in the same shot like that. Like the relationship that the framing creates between them is like really comedic to me. And you know, I had too much fun with this. Because this arm is like blown off, I use Particular to make some like crumbs, and bounces off of the hillside here. And then I thought, well, what if the icing on his right hand is not, you know, well, I'm saying his, but whatever, like the Gingerdead man's like right hand. What if that icing is like actually like a slash, like a wound, and it's like bleeding? So like it's something happened, like it's almost like this arm has been severed. This arm is like almost severed, but it's wounded and bleeding. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use CC Mr. Mercury, digging into the archives to create some kind of like Gingerdead blood of icing kind of like leaking out. Because like liquid is not always the easiest thing to create, as you know. If you've tried to simulate liquids in After Effects, it can be challenging. And for this far away, CC Mr. Mercury was actually perfect. So I was just kind of fiddling with the puppet tool, and I created an expression to link the puppet pin to the CC Mr. Mercury emitter thing. And so then there's all this stuff, which is procedural and kind of fun. And then I added some weird like turbulent displace on his face. Again, it's not finished, but it was like really fun. What I did want to cover though is I want to share a little bit about how I made this background thing with the ice. I just love like icy effects like this. I've never had a chance to do this, so maybe there's like tricks that everybody knows but me. But I was kind of experimenting, and I started out initially with just kind of like a background and like text, and I thought like, okay, well, we'll just do this, and that's how I was gonna do it. But then I kept like adding stuff, and I went to the background and I added a little bit of this texturize effect, which I'm going to talk about quite a bit because I used it all over the place in this project, and it was so great. And texturize is like one of those effects that like, you ever have like those effects where you love it and like you use it sometimes, but then you're always like, I gotta unlock the power of this thing, like I gotta figure out how to use this more. And so like this project, I finally got to like really go on like a very serious like weekend date with texturize. Like we went to the mountains and we brought a picnic, and it was like really special, and we really got to know each other. And I added a little bit of texture in the background, but then it like became this like addiction. And I was like, let's just do more stuff with it. So then I created this like textured background thing, which was like really fun. And texturize has this built-in thing, which is really cool. Let me see if I can't. This is gonna probably mess everything up, but so this was just like the texturize effect, and I just used the ground preset. But the key is that normally I think maybe it's even in the multiply blend mode or the normal blend mode or whatever. So you apply texturize, and it has all these textures and stuff like that. But just by changing the blend mode, and having a light colored solid, then if I change it to screen, then it's going to get rid of all of the dark stuff. And then this, concrete looking texture all of a sudden looks very icy. And there's a built-in mask, which is really cool because a lot of times you just kind of want texture like a little bit on the edges. But after playing with the mask and even with all of the controls here to change like the aspect and the fall offs, you can really change like the aspect ratio of it. So if you want just kind of like on the top and the bottom or just on the left and right side, you could fiddle with aspect and the fall off controls, the feathers. There's a lot of really great controls here if you just kind of want to slap this on and not have to worry about making like a mat or some other type of mask. It's built in here, which is really convenient. But I think I wanted something more like irregular. So I added, actually, let me back this up. I'm gonna undo this so I could, before I get too far off track of like, wait, how did I set this up? Undo, there we go. Okay, so I added this solid layer, which is, maybe I have to take, there we go. So I added a solid layer and I used a mask on it and I feathered the edges of the mask, and then I used the roughened edges effect, which is like one of my favorites. It's like probably second to fractal noise and effects that I use all the time. So with the roughened edges, I can kind of get these like uglier edges, and it looks really terrible by itself, but I did some experimenting and playing when using it as an alpha matte here for the growing of the textured background. And then let's see, let me solo just this. So then because I'm using that alpha matte and I'm animating the mask on the audio is going shing, 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 shing. So the audio is going here, and I turn that off so I could pay attention to what I'm doing. But I animated the mask expansion, so it kind of like closes in, and then we have this kind of effect where, and you could see like the matteness where it's like letting that stuff show through. And again, this looks kind of terrible, but when you have like the whole composite together, it looks pretty cool in my opinion. I like the way it turned out. And then I also added a vignette, which I called Viggy on my, I don't know why I like calling my vignettes, I label them Viggy. And then I added a frost layer, which just kind of like little like softness on the edges. And it's just a white solid, but it's really interesting when you have blend modes that you can just have a little extra something, and it seems like it, because it's white, it just brings out the texture on the edges more. So I didn't actually add any extra stuff from the frost, but just having a little bit of white there, so that's before the frost, that's after. So it didn't really add any texture, but it feels like it does because it illuminates these like corners. So I had all of this kind of like blurring stuff, and then I had my text and I used like Gaussian blur there, so it was like softer, and then I put the text underneath the texturized layer, which makes it feel like the text is being kind of like covered in this ice, which I love that. Now I want to talk about Particular, because this was like really cool making this snow. I feel like snow is one of those things that like it's pretty easy to do in a cheesy way. I think that like I meant to get this like set up, but there's a CC Snow, something like, yeah, CC Snowfall. So you could just like get like a white solid and then just dump CC Snowfall on, and there you have like an instant snowfall, which is like really cool. But it feels like a digital thing. And so one of the things that makes snow feel realistic, or any kind of like organic anything feel realistic, is that there's just so much variety. Digital stuff always feels too regulated, it's too clean, it's too polished, it's too like uniform. And so with Trapcode Particular, we can make the particles non-uniform. We could make the snowflakes non-uniform, and we could make their movement non-uniform, and then we could layer those and make different systems. So I want to show you a little bit about how I set this up. Not because we're all in desperate need on the 20th of December to know how to make snow necessarily, but there's a lot of really cool tricks for Particular, I think, in making snow in different ways. And I kind of wanted to go over those. Okay, so I'm gonna just start from scratch here, and I'll call this Particular. You know what, this is a really, oh wait, I'll just make it comp size, there we go. Okay, Particular. And Yeah, I'm just gonna start from scratch. One of the things that was like really brought up to me again as I was like playing around with this thing is like how important the cloudlet particle is in particular. And I'll show you this when we get Particular up and running. But for the crumbs, the breadcrumbs on the gingerbread man, you know, I use the cloudlet. Like a lot of times, like I'll go to like stock sites or whatever, and there's like stock After Effects backgrounds or motion graphics backgrounds, and there's like snow stuff or like lights or whatever. And so much of that is just using the default sphere thing in Particular, which is really powerful because there's so many options in Particular. You could just kind of, you know, adjust all the other settings and just leave them at spheres or whatever. But there is just kind of like this very formulaic sense when you see that. It's just like you can tell, you sense, you feel that all of those particles are just like the same. And Cloudlet gives us a lot of like just built-in variety, but not, it doesn't stray too far from the thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the emitter. I'm going to change this from point to box so that we have a box that's emitting the particles. And then what I want to do actually, and this is a new thing, the Particular about a year ago really redid all of the physics stuff going on with it. And I'm, you know, every time there's a new big like Trapcode release like that, it kind of takes me a minute to like implement all this stuff in my workflow and kind of change the habits that I have. And so one of the things that I've kind of like adapted to a habit is changing how I'm making big atmospheric emitters like this, like snow or rain. I used to have to go into the direction thing, and I would change this to directional. And because, you know, Particular is 3D and the particles typically come at you, you have to like rotate it in a weird way, and you have to kind of like set all that stuff up. And then X rotation, or the X-axis isn't the X-axis because it's rotated, and so things can get kind of confusing. So what I've started doing is changing how I do that. I'm going to take the velocity all the way down, which is another thing too. I try to fake gravity by using velocity and direction and rotation, all that kind of stuff. And then after last year, I was like, hey, dummy, why are you doing this? Because you don't have to like do all these like mental gymnastics. I can just take away the velocity and just make the gravity. I could just do this the way that like the universe does snow. So I'm going to increase the, actually, I'm going to take this XYZ individual so I can actually control all the parameters of my box of snow here, and I'll make this 2000 pixels wide. So then our box is 2000 pixels wide, and maybe I'll just increase the particles per second so we can just kind of see a little bit more about this box. And then I don't need this much in the Y for right now, so I'm gonna take this to 100. So we have like a very like kind of narrow sense of our emitter here, and I'm gonna raise this up in the Y-axis. Typically I would take this off screen, but just so you could see like what's going on here, I'm not going to do that. So we have particles now that are just kind of like, they have no velocity, they're just kind of growing right there. So now what I can do is go down to environment and then increase the gravity. And let's take this up to, wait, no, that's ridiculous. So if I take this up to like 70, then we can see that like the particles fall. And I didn't have to worry about the rotation or the direction or even the velocity. There's no velocity. These particles are just being acted on by gravity like they would in the real world. And I really like doing it like that. It just, there's a lot less like mental hoops to jump through. And then we can really start. So this is kind of like the generic like stock template snow background. We're like, oh, snow is falling. Yeah, it looks like snow. But like we can do a lot more to make this extra sexy. So for example, I could add like a little bit of wind to this, and you can see a little bit of drift, and I could go to air turbulence, and I could have it move with the wind, and I could affect the position of the particles based on the air turbulence, which kind of creates little randomness. So some of these happy little snowflakes are actually moving to the left against the wind because the turbulence field gives them the permission to kind of just like live their own lives. You know what I'm saying? Like they're growing up, they're becoming their own snowflakes. And so this lets them have some like autonomy. So already we're starting to see some like variation that's starting to feel organic. And I could, of course, crank this up. But let's go back to the particle itself. And so we have these spheres by default. And if we, you know, typically you go in here and like add size randomness. And so now it feels like there's like more depth and it feels, you know, blah, 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 whatever. But if we change the particle itself from, just to zoom in ridiculously here, from a sphere to a cloudlet is kind of like its own particle. And so each one of these already has like built-in randomness. It's already kind of like its own shape. And some of these like are similar, but there's just so much variation that it just kind of conveys the sense that these are irregular objects. Even if we go back and take the size down to like, I don't know, 2 or something like that. And maybe I'll increase this cloudlet feather a little bit so they're a little bit softer on the edges. And so now we have something like these feel like chunks of snow. And there's just so much more organicness to them. So a couple other things just very quickly, if you're not familiar with this, you know, if I'm starting my scene and my text like here, I want there to be snow on the scene already. So like just starting this here, you know, by the time that the comp is done, the snow is like just entering the frame. So what I want to do is go into global controls. This used to be in the emitter settings. It's now moved to global controls on the main system. And I'm going to increase pre-run, which is how many seconds the simulation starts before frame 0. So I could just say like 5 just to be safe. And so then now I have all the snow, and the snow is not lasting long enough, the life of the snow particles. So it's kind of like a snow halter top. So what I want to do is go into particle and then increase like the, there we go. So then we have like more life to our particles, they last longer. And another thing that I want to do is I want to go into how this looks. I want to go into rendering, and for the motion blur, it's like the setting down here at the bottom, open this up. And I don't want to like have to worry about the comp settings. So I'm just going to turn this to on, which is going to force these particles to have motion blur and be softer. And so you can see like the difference that that makes already, just like a little bit of motion blur. So then what I did was I went into my show systems and I went into the designer and I duplicated this system and I pushed it back in Z space. So it was like further back, and then I had the particles moving like faster or with a little bit more wind or less wind, just kind of varying things up. And I did that multiple times. And so then like, you know, cooking show, this is like the thing that I ended up with. The other thing too is that like, you know, snow is like white, it's reflective. So we all have a tendency to kind of like make white snow. It's a very common thing. But when you actually kind of like look at like a photograph of like snow, you know, it's so it's semi-transparent. It is reflective, so it's bright, but it's semi-transparent. So like it doesn't always, it's not like white, you know? So having it just kind of like a little bit, you know, a little bit, the color is like not quite pure white, adds like some realness as well. So you can see I have like multiple layers. Some of it's like falling straight down in the background. And so we just like a lot of variation, and some of it's more wind blown, which again creates like more variety to like the texture of what we're looking at. And I don't know, I just like really love this. So if we go back to like our full thing, you could see the difference that the snow makes in the final composition. Adds like all this like texture and such to the whole thing. I would have hoped that After Effects would have like, you know, held on to this in RAM and I wouldn't have to like redo this all over again, but it didn't do that. Let me show you really quick this the bang thing, which is like pretty fun.
Just before you jump into that, Chad, got a couple of questions. One is back on that particular piece. How would you feel if you added some of the physics simulation, specifically Maender, into those snowflakes?
That's a really good question. So I think that's, let's go back to this little happy fellow. I think it can definitely be done. So I go into physics simulations, there's Maender, and I could enable Maender, which gives, again, even more autonomy to these particles, almost like a teenager level of autonomy, where they're just kind of like, I'm going to do whatever. And they definitely go their own directions. My challenge with that, and why I didn't do that, and I probably wouldn't look into that, is for two reasons. Number one is that like Maender, it kind of, it can move in a way that kind of takes away from the organicness of what's going on. It makes them like too independent. And it's almost like, if you look at this here, like they're all so now independent that it doesn't feel as much like snow. And I can fiddle with the, the direction, the speed, and all that kind of stuff to play with it. But it does kind of just make them not respect the wind and the gravity as much. So I prefer to use the environment things. And the other thing too is that because it's a physics simulation, it's going to be more computationally heavy because it's an actual simulation. It's not just kind of like adding a setting. It's like actually going in and doing some very intelligent simulation work, which is like typically, slows things down a bit. So I don't typically like the final result as much, and it's a little bit slower, which is why I didn't use Maender. But that's a really, really great, great question. And I'm sure for some instances, like Maender would be ideal. But
it's an interesting trade-off. The conversation we often have about this is what wind setting should we use? Should we go to the CPU? Should we use the GPU setting? How do you speed up processes? Typically, the smaller the sprite, the faster it renders, and so on. So and if you've got a simulation and one of those default particles inside Particular, it tends to process faster on the CPU rather than GPU. GPUs are more geared towards specific sprites that you've added in. But that's a great kind of investigation into that. Which do I use? How long have I got to render this scene out?
Yeah, and that's, which is again going back to Cloudlet, not to keep tooting that horn, but the Cloudlet is like a built-in thing, so it's gonna render faster than if you were to like use a sprite of like a snowflake or something like that. Which again, for some things that you're gonna do, you're gonna want like huge versions of like big snowflakes falling and stuff like that. But Cloudlet is like built in, so it's gonna render very, very quickly. Also, anyways,
whilst you're there, Chad, can I sidetrack you again, just very slightly, just for a few
please
seconds?
I love it.
Just on, would you mind opening up the designer and then going to like once it's opened, go to a default setup? Because is it too nerdy to have a favorite preset inside Particular? Possibly.
I don't think it's nerdy at all.
It's just that you got such a great ice scene, and also who mentioned it? Scott mentioned it earlier on about the fact that your ice scene looked just like the starting graphics for the new Dexter New Blood series, with the
awesome.
ice around the edge of the screen. Looks just like that.
Oh.
But if you wouldn't mind just going back to a default set, so just hit reset on the bottom left of the whole panel.
Yeah.
My favorite preset, since you mentioned ice, is over in the motion graphics section.
Okay.
Ice trail, so it's about halfway down motion graphics because it's stored alphabetically.
Okay.
And it's something which is Harry Frank designed this a couple of versions of Particular ago.
Ooh.
But here we go. And the beauty of this is if you click on it and drag it around the screen, then you can see that it looks like it's starting to freeze on the front of the screen and then melts slightly because of the nature of that particular setting. So whenever you talk about ice, I just have to go and just mention this thing because it's a thing of beauty and it's sitting there in the presets, just being completely underrated. But yeah, it's a fantastic little thing to play around with.
Speaking of presets, I forgot to mention this, but presets are great and they save multiple systems. So I went in and I use these presets all the time, but I made just Chad Snow based on this. And so now I could just click of a button, add my snow preset whenever I want. It's all queued up and ready to go. So I don't have to reinvent the wheel every time I want to add multiple snow systems. So
you could share that with us as we could upload that into the download folder, couldn't we?
Yes, I can. That's great. I always feel like Rob, I feel sad because everyone has all these things everyone wants. And I'm like, well, here's this thing that I did. So if I have a thing that people wanted, then great, good. Yeah, I would love to share that preset. Cool. Anything else on the snow before I move on?
Stop interrupting you. Sorry.
No, that's great. That's the most fun part. And we don't have anything to get through or anything, here's just really quick and going back here to my finale scene or whatever with the crumbs. And now you could see a little bit more. I don't know if we need to like really get into this, but I used cloudlets as particles for these crumbs. It was like perfect. Like I was playing around with it and I had like the spheres, you know, and they were dropping and I got like the color right and the lighting right and like all these different things I was playing with. And it was just like, cool, this is very good, but like something feels just like really, really gross and off and super dumb about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, cloudlet, let's try that. And it was like, oh, this is perfect. And so then I had like two systems, one of like kind of like bigger chunks and fewer particles, another one of like kind of smaller little crumbs that are falling. And it's kind of like depth of fielded away, so you can't really see too much of what's going on, but you could see how there's like variety and there's like way too many particles and it's coming out too fast and there's much problems here. But the cloudlet adds the regularity that makes this feel like much more believable, which is really cool.
The June was commenting earlier on about the look of the gingerbread in this scene and how you've achieved that through the color grade to make them seem really menacing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I'm going to get into this a little bit, but I use looks very heavily. I was like, again, I was like trying to like increase my After Effects user self-esteem by creating something that looked cool very quickly. And so obviously like I turned to looks. And let's see, this is what it looked like without the final color correction, which is like much more friendly. Like it looks like this is like, okay, this is a neighbor. I'm about to go share some Christmas cookies. I hope this goes well. I hope they don't judge me. And then this is like all out war. Someone's gonna die. So I went into, and I also added an additional curves thing. So this is the looks. I'll open this up. I love how you get like a preview of stuff here and the strength slider. I'll come back to this in just a second, but yeah, so I found this look and I was kind of going through, you know, all these different, you know, like in the Blockbuster cool settings, you know, there's like classic Blockbuster, critical care, there's like some iced wing. I use that for some of these or whatever. So I just found like a really cool preset that I liked. And then I can go in here and I went into color reset and I fiddled with like, you know, some of the settings just like a little bit, just kind of like tweaked them to make it like work for this. But honestly, it looked pretty cool as it was and it was fine. And then like I can adjust the strength to taste. So if like, it was a little bit too hardcore, I could like take this down or whatever. Like sometimes, you know, like the presets are meant to kind of like brighten highlights and darken shadows because it doesn't know what your footage is. So sometimes maybe your highlights are already too bright, your shadows are already too dark, and then it just kind of like blows those out or crushes the shadows or whatever. So then you could kind of go into the strength slider and kind of like dial that back a little bit to make it work for your project. You could also go into like, you know, the shoulder or whatever the actual individual settings are, but sometimes it's like, it's perfect, just like tone it down a little bit and that strength is perfect. So then I added another little curves adjustment to, you know, further tweak this a bit and bring out the stuff that I wanted and make this look even more like dark and menacing and evil. The bang thing, just a really quick final two tips here. Well, okay, so here's, I had a solid layer. I applied bang to that. And oh, I think I needed to go back down here to the composite on and just composite on transparent. So then there was this thing. And also, if you've never used bang, it's like pretty fun. Like I don't do too much like action movie gun things in my world, but this is pretty cool. And also I put it on a solid layer underneath the layer with the gun. And the way that this works is that you have this like gunny thing that you get to like play with of like, okay, this is where I want the gun to be pointing. And then there's this back thing, which is like the aim thing. So then I could just like kind of like change like where the gun is coming from. So using these 2 points and also changing the UI overlay to assault rifle. So well, I don't know my guns. Atomic rifle? I don't know, probably something like that. And I could kind of put this close to the spout of the gun.
Yes.
The shooter hole. And then I can arrange this point to be there. There's also like a roll. So essentially what I'm trying to do is, you know, put the perspective of this thing in the right spot there. And again, I don't know about guns, but what I wanted to do was to get this underneath the gun so it feels like it's kind of like coming out of it. I could also adjust like the style and the look and the flash shape profile and everything else. There's also a bunch of presets that I used that'll open up the a preset browser, and you could like pick all these different cool presets to use. But what I wanted to do was then take this into Supercomp, because I wanted to have this glow coming over the top, because I wanted the bang to be underneath the gun, but if this were actually filmed on camera, the glow would be coming over the gun, but you can't do that in After Effects. So what I did is I selected bang, and I selected the background there, and went to Effect, RG VFX, and Supercomp, and that adds this to Supercomp. And then what I'm going to do is go to this like, oh wait, I didn't get my rifle. Okay, here's what I can do though. I can go to Dustin, add Dustin, restack Dustin. Sorry, Dustin, I accidentally left you out of that whole equation. And then oh wait, no, I want bang to be below that. Yeah, that's right. So then what I'm going to do is to, for the bang here, I'm going to hit plus, choose optical glow. And then, I mean, these settings are a little ridiculous, but the magic, as you could already see, is that even though the bang layer is beneath the gun, the glow is allowed to go on top of the gun. And that's the magic of Supercomp. Like, that is just so easy and so fantastic. So I just use it for a very simple example here, but just so helpful. Another thing that I did very quickly, it was that I had this render in the background. I'll just turn off Supercomp. So I had this render in the background, and I wanted to like blur it because I blew it up super huge to make it seem like it was a tight shot. So you're seeing some like, you know, artifacts and junk. And so I wanted to blur this a bit based on the depth of the thing. So I have the depth pass here, and it's showing up as blank, I think because the sizes are off. But what I did was I used the camera lens blur effect, and then used that depth matte as a pass. So then also it needed to be inverted. So then the stuff that was like closer was not as blurry, and the stuff further back was more blurry. And then it kind of, because I wanted to make it feel like it was like a long lens. So I brought this up closer to the camera, size it up, and this is like the final result after adding some like looks. And then I also added the universe camera shake as an adjustment layer, and this was like the final deal.
I liked how you described it earlier, where you depth of fielded it as a verb.
Yeah. So those were my, another thing, I did a bunch of like stupid things with this. I actually took this into Photoshop. I re-rendered, I took Elly's file, I re-rendered it with like a 200mm lens. It was like super like long lens. And then I went into Photoshop. I actually opened that up. I don't know if there's any point in showing this, but I went and just like used like a quick lasso tool, and then just kind of like did this like junky selection. And then I did this trick where I hit Control J or Command J to make a new layer based on the selection to copy it. So then I had the eye by itself. And then I could Control or Command click the layer thumbnail to get that selection back, and then select the original layer, and then go to Edit, Content Aware Fill. And then all this craziness happens. I'm just going to click OK. And basically it just fills that out, so we have a patch. So then what happens is I have a patch that covers that up, and then I have the left eye isolated. So then I went into After Effects, and then I can, you know, do all these things where I made him like very serious, right? Push in, and then Gingerdead man is like, oh, I want some revenge. He's like, oh, I'm sorry. So I used the puppet tool on his mouth, and and like just use like simple scale on his like eyes or whatever. But like, and, I really like Dustin's fog that he did, how he put a bunch of extra fog in the scene. And so I really wanted to go in and add more of that fog in this like finale thing. But it's just one of the things I didn't have time for. I couldn't get it. I couldn't do it justice in the time that I had. So I just like said goodbye to it. But I really liked, I have a little bit of fractal noise fog going here to give it a little bit of texture, but I love that element, the atmospheric element that Dustin added. Anyways, I mean, I could go into like any of this stuff more if we wanted to, but that's kind of like the basic gist of like the stuff that I wanted to show here. I also I really want this to be a great cheesy trailer, so I even like made the text thing because it was like, you know, in the deep Arctic or whatever, and then the final thing, this year you will wish your holiday was gluten-free. So, you know, that's the final cheesy line. Anyways, the end. Thank you.
Are gluten-free gingerbreads less dangerous then?
Yeah. Well, you just don't want any gluten at that point. You just don't want any gluten anywhere near you. You know, 'cause it's dangerous potentially.
Great stuff. This, I mean, that was a fast forward of all the sort of things you could do to this, and those various ideas when you're coming up with iterations for how you would present the next stages are typically what we have to do, the A and B designs. So it's really interesting to see your different approaches and just throwing stuff at it.
Yeah, it was really fun. You know, I was always like playing around with like the gingerbread man, for example, and like the eyes opening. I was like, you know, this, I bet the people that were designing the asset browser were not thinking that this could be a thing that someone would do to these lovely assets that they've made. But, you know, it is another testament to like what you can do. I mean, this kind of brings it full circle. And that's kind of like the whole point of this month, was to say like, hey, there's an asset browser, here's what you can do with it. And so it's kind of fun to be able to like even take things in a ridiculous way like this.
If we were to ask you, Chad, to provide a version of this project so that people can have a nose round and see some of the things you did in it, especially the things like that expression that you mentioned to get those elements dropping off the Gingerdead's hand, would that be possible? Could we organize that?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I can totally do that. If there's like anyone that's interested in that,
Amazing.
I would love to provide like the particular preset, all that stuff. Yeah, for sure.
And I think for once we haven't used any stock imagery, so we have the rights to be able to share this. So I think we could do it, can't we?
Yeah. The only thing, I've used the stock music, but I'll just mix it down before I send it along.
Okay. All right.
Or I could just re-record my voice being like shing 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 shing.
That's
Which version I want.
I'll put like reverb.
Great stuff, Chad.
Thanks. That was fun.
Right, we're at the top of the hour, so let me rescue the screen back from you.
Yes. Can I do anything to aid that process, or can you take it?
No, I'm going to do it from here.
Okay.
There we go. Yes.
Nailed it.
So that was. Yes, do you think, you know, I've done this hundreds and hundreds of times by now. I still made the error a few weeks ago of accidentally hitting end webinar in the middle of one, but we won't talk about that.
It's like my greatest fear.
Yes, exactly. So, and just some very nice comments coming in through on the questions. Thank you, Andreas and June, Amina and Hannah and Ashur and Matthew, so for saying those nice things about what Chad was sharing. And in fact, if you would like more of Chad's stuff, I know we record these sessions and on the Maxon Training Team YouTube channel, that's where we share these. And this particular recording will be there in a couple of hours with all the links and some of the projects files that we've been talking about. But also we have multiple YouTube channels. We've got one for Maxon and we've got one for Red Giant. So if you were to go to the Red Giant YouTube channel and just type in Chad on there, you'll see many of his amazing tutorials that he's recorded over the years, especially in Trapcode. And Chad's one of our lead experts in Trapcode and is always finding really interesting ways to actually composite those particles into the background. And especially in form, I really like the technique that you've got of actually having some of the background reflecting onto the particles as well. So all those small little hidden tricks, just like you were showing us with Bang in Supercomp, of making it look a little more real, I think would be well worth having a look. And we all know that making your reflection more real for a Gingerdead scene is what sells it. Cool. So this is it for our demystifying sessions for this year, but there's more to come, as we talked about at the beginning, all next year. So I just have to say thank you to Elly and to Chad and to Dustin for this month. Thank you for bearing with us and our slightly silly holiday themed.
No, it was a blast. It was a blast.
So fun.
Great
Super
hanging
fun.
with you all.
So fun. You too, buddy. It was great. Love all those tips. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
those,
I feel
yes. Go
I
on,
feel
Dustin.
like I need to go fight the Gingerdead now. And I feel
It's
like
on you.
if Ice Cube were wearing a Santa hat and just got really angry at like Gingerbread House, I mean, yeah.
And don't forget, if you want to let us know what sort of topics you'd like us to cover next year as well, please let us know. training@maxon.net. And just a reminder, inside the PDF that you've got inside the software, the webinar software, goes to the handouts. You can download this PDF. It shows you where to download the actual resource files that we've been sharing, and also that link to the free t-shirt that we want to say thank you for joining us on this journey this year. So please do that. And if you've got any problems getting hold of it, email us, training@maxon.net, and we'll sort you out with that. But thank you again. Happy holidays to all, and we'll see you in just a couple of weeks on the next series of these things.
See everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.